Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium for the week ending Monday, June 13th, 2022. Case file number 651, written by Chef Fuzzy, the good boy, Sam. Hello. I have never ever told this story to anyone, but I've kept it in my mind since it happened in 1998. I just want to preface by saying I've never held a belief in ghosts, the afterlife, or anything of the sort, either past or present. Even this event is not enough to make me believe ghosts are real. However, I do not have any material explanation for the event. It was mid-August 1998. I was 22 years old and working a summer job at a gas station before heading back to school. I had started college late as I fumbled about for about a year or two after high school. Anyways, on a nice warm summer night, cars would come and go. As we had a full-service pump, I'd walk out of my little storefront for every car and pump their gas. The weather was perfect, not too hot when normally it would be blistering hot that time of year. Around the side of the building were the entrances to the bathrooms. I headed that way to use the restroom when I saw two hippie-looking teens with a dog, a boy and a girl. I grew up listening to bands like the Grateful Dead and Fish, still do. And while I don't present as a hippie, I feel very comfortable in those circles. I could tell these kids had probably been hitchhiking. They didn't look destitute, but they were dirty and probably a bit hungry. Even though I was probably no more than 5 years older than them, I felt bad and wanted to help. I put a few bucks in the vending machine, bought them some snacks and drinks, and gave the dog a bowl of water. They were very thankful, and the doggy was very friendly. We chatted for a minute, then the boy said, "The dog is not ours. He was just hanging out here. He was friendly, so we just started playing and patting him." That was strange, of course, but not too crazy, right? Dogs get lost all the time. He was friendly and didn't look too mistreated, so I just assumed he had gotten lost. Oh, and he had a collar and tag. Cool, I can find his owner. Oh, and his name, Sam. Important to note that he would respond to me calling his name as Sam. A car pulled up to the full-service pump, so I ran out and did my thing. Last I looked, the hippies and Sam were still hanging out at this time, sorta off to the side of the store, near where I first saw them. I finished up with the car and turned around to head back to the storefront. No hippies anywhere in sight. Nowhere, just gone. Perhaps they hitched a ride while I was turned around, but it was only a minute. When I walked out to the street, I could see quite a ways in both directions. They were nowhere to be seen anywhere. This is the last I saw of the two hippie kids. I hope they're okay. Sam, though, was still there, but it was getting late. I wanted to help. I decided to call the local police, who gave me the phone number of the animal shelter. I called over there, and the way that it was handled seemed very odd at the time, and still does, but I wanted to help, so I went along with it. Sam was a good boy after all. The person I spoke with at Animal Control looked up Sam's info based on the dog tag number. This person, instead of saying, "Hold on, we will send out an officer or even just call the owner," instead, they gave me Sam's owner's phone number and told me to call them. I called the number and an older man politely answered the phone. I explained I had Sam. I gave him water and he's just hanging out with me here, but the gas station is closing soon, so it would be best for you to come pick up Sam. He seemed perplexed and asked me to describe Sam to him. I did. Sam looked like a mutt lab mix, darkish brown coat, a medium large sized dog, very friendly disposition, just a regular old good boy. What the man said next has been rattling around my brain for the last 24 years. The man said, "We had a dog named Sam, but he passed away a good 10 years ago." I was dumbfounded and all I could do was describe Sam again, to which the man said, "Yeah, that sounds like Sam, but no way it could be. It just can't be." He was polite and we talked back and forth a bit more, but with no resolution, we hung up. I was unsure what to do next. But I quickly realized that there was nothing for me to do. Just like the hippie kids, Sam too was nowhere to be seen. He had just vanished from inside the store. I would give anything to have this make sense, to be able to actually resolve this in a way that makes sense. I've never been able to. I have lots and lots of theories, but I have no resolution. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. Case file number 652, written by Rory. A truly astronomical coincidence. I heard about this glitch in the Matrix subreddit through a podcast and thought it was the right place to share my story and hopefully get some good insight and opinions from people who may have experienced or know of something similar. In 2012, when I was 16 years old, me and my 6 friends went to Thorpe Park, theme park here in the UK. The new ride, The Swarm, had just opened, so of course we were going straight there. We queued for about 45 minutes before being sent to the stands. I have no idea what these are called, the things you stand between waiting for the next carriage to arrive. On the second row of about 12 rows, the carriage ahead had just been loaded and a very large black dude, probably at least 6'7", was placed in his seat. As the ride was about to go, an attendant came over and told this guy he was too big to ride and had to go wait outside for his party to finish the ride. Now this guy was absolutely huge, a big afro and basically incredibly memorable. Anyway, after we had been on the ride, I again remember seeing him outside with his friends. They were loudly taking the piss out of him for not being allowed on, basically. Fast forward about 14 months and we went to Thorpe Park again. I believe it was more or less the same group of friends I went with before, maybe give or take 1 or 2 people. Again, we of course went on Swarm. We waited around 45 minutes again, and we were sent to the same stands again, second from the front, with my 3 friends who came on the road the last time. As the ride was about to leave, an attendant came over and told a certain gentleman he was too big to ride. As I looked over, it was the exact same person as before. I know for an absolute fact this 6'7" humongous man was the same person. I remembered him distinctly, everything was the same. The way he climbed out of the chair, walked off and went outside. The only thing I don't remember is whether or not it was the same attendant, as I was honestly so flabbergasted by what I was seeing. I turned to my friends and said, "What the hell? That's the same guy from last time in the exact situation as last time." Nobody paid much attention to me, but sort of acknowledged it. Maybe nobody remembered the time before like I did. I kept going on for a good few minutes, but nobody seemed to listen or care. By the time we got off the ride, this time he wasn't waiting with his friends, the only notable difference. One of the things that I always found odd about this is the fact I never remembered seeing this guy in line both of the times I went. 45 minutes wait each time, and I never once noticed this guy standing, where he would have been, like 30 people ahead of me. And trust me, with the huge afro and 6'7", he would have been easily noticed, unmistakably. Since then, I have mentioned it maybe twice to my friends who were there and they all look at me like I was crazy or I vaguely remember something, probably just wanting me to stop talking. I understand this may not be an exciting story for some. I'm just hoping somebody could have experienced something similar. My own assessment is that it was really just the biggest coincidence, and it just so happened to myself and this guy ended up going in the exact same theme park on the same days twice in a row, on the same ride at the exact same time in the exact same situation as 14 months previous. But that is near impossible, right? Case notes, file number 652. So you are correct that this could just be a coincidence. However, this would not be my instinct. Whenever there are crazy coincidences like this, well, it's not that I don't believe in coincidences like the saying goes. I would just say that if something happens multiple times that seems impossibly connected, then there's a good chance it is. I think there's a good chance that for whatever reason, the developers of this server, or maybe some other force, whatever you want to call it, wanted you two to interact, and this was just a way to force a meeting. Now, I don't know what would happen if you did talk to him, but if you ever see this person again, I say, go say hi. Who knows why, but I think it's important. Case file number 653, written by Predzjenik Planet. What's the point of a car that can just teleport? This happened to me about 2 years ago. I was driving on a detour road next to the city so I wouldn't get stuck in the city's rush hour. At the end of that road, there is an intersection with 2 lanes going left to a one-way road and the right lane that goes to the airport. I remember another car getting so close behind me that I cursed something about it. The light went green and we started driving. I turned left and looked in my inner mirror to see where the car was, because I got mad recently, and he was nowhere to be seen. I kept looking behind because I thought he might have gone right at the very last second. He didn't. There were no cars around me anywhere. I thought about it for the next 5 minutes and kinda let it go. Fast forward to one day when I'm with my friend talking about random things in life. He starts talking about how something strange happened to him in the same spot. I knew what he was going to say before he even said it. I let him speak and I was correct. The same intersection. He was going left and after turning, the cars behind him weren't there anymore. This was the only glitch in the matrix that I remember experiencing, and it was shared with my friend. Case notes, file number 653. You know, it makes you wonder, were those cars bound to our reality, our dimension? There's tons of objects that disappear and return. The exact cause of this is unknown. Maybe there are entities in another pocket dimension that are pulling them in, just to examine and study them. It stands to reason that they would want to study larger objects, but why at this specific intersection? You'd think that would make it more obvious, and that if in fact these are entities, they would want to remain incognito. So maybe it isn't entities, maybe it is some sort of ley-lined force in this exact spot that is pulling objects in. I wonder if they come back, and obviously, what about all the people inside of them? Or was it merely a perception glitch? The cars were never there, you just perceive them to be, for some reason. That it also happened to your friend does lead me to the idea that it is some kind of force in that specific intersection area. I wonder if all the people in those cars perceive themselves as having jumped ahead a few miles or something. There's many stories about people being ported ahead in cars especially, so maybe it's related to that. Creepy file number 25, written by Stinkyuho 13, The Shadow of the Night. This story occurred a few years back. I would have been around 8 or 9 at the time. My old bedroom sat facing out towards the street and also happened to be right next to our front door. It was very small as it had been built in place of our old front porch. The roof was slightly slanted downward towards the window, which took up most of the wall, and the bed could only fit in one way. It was painted purple, not a nice purple either, like a kid's bedroom, of course. My bed sat facing towards the door to my bedroom, parallel to the window. A closet took a part of the corner between my bedroom door and the window, making for an unusual space. Every night, I checked to make sure the curtains were shut all the way, as the idea of people watching from the street made me very uncomfortable, even at a young age where things like that shouldn't even cross my mind. Every night, I slept soundly, no nightmares, no sudden noises waking me in the middle of the night, nothing like that. That was until the middle of the year, during a school break. I remember waking to the sound of someone breathing. I couldn't move. I couldn't catch my own breath. I was just stuck. I remember so clearly seeing a man standing in the corner of my room, stuck partly behind the curtain as if it would hide him. Of course, I could see him. He was just this dark entity who stood and watched. After what felt like hours, I was able to get back to sleep. In the morning, I told my mom about it and what had happened, and she explained it was just a strange nightmare and that I was fine, but the way she said it wasn't very believable. These cases of sleep paralysis went on for about a year, taking me up to the middle of the next year when I was likely 8 or 9. I remember waking in the middle of the night just like I had most nights for the last year, to the man in the corner, only this time I could move. I stayed absolutely still. Despite now knowing he was actually there, this wasn't sleep paralysis. I could hear his faint breathing, like he was trying to hide from me as much as I was trying to hide from him. I couldn't help but think, has this man been here every night this year? I remember the thoughts I had, how I'd run out of the room and scream for my mom, how she'd call the police, how this man would be arrested and sent away. But I couldn't do that. He was basically in front of the door. I spent the night staring at him, trying to fall asleep. I'd say it was around 5 a.m. I was able to drift off, just sort of as the birds started to wake up. I woke up and lo and behold, he was gone. The first thing I did was tell my mom. She already looked uneasy, like she already knew. That's when I heard two people talking outside. I found out later the people outside were my neighbor and a police officer who was taking an eyewitness statement. Around 6 in the morning, our neighbor spotted a man standing outside my window. She called the police, but he was gone before they arrived. Other neighbors stepped forward saying they'd seen him outside in the middle of the day, looking at our house. There were no signs of forced entry, only 2 footprints in the flower bed outside my window. My mother told the officers my account of what had happened, and they came to the conclusion that he'd done the same thing last year. I saw it, and it sparked my tangent of sleep paralysis. The streetlight outside projected his shadow, so it appears as though he was standing in my room. This whole time, he'd been waiting patiently outside my room. Who knows what would have happened if my neighbor didn't spot him on her way out for work? Just a few more minutes and she would have missed him entirely. Bonus file, written by Alethi Will Shaper. A dark force occupies my hospital. So, to preface this, I work in a hospital on the SEU, monitoring patients' heart rates. Additionally, I also do not have any mental illness aside from seasonal depression and anxiety, since I know the first thing someone is going to say is, maybe you should get checked for psychosis. Yesterday, I was doing my normal routine of running patient reports to the different floors that we monitor, and after having a bit of an annoying encounter with a nurse who yelled at me, I was brooding a bit as I walked down the hall. I had my eyes on the floor as I walked, and as I got towards the ICU, so that I could access the stairwell. Our hospital is fairly small, so the SCU and the ICU share a floor. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a person standing by the elevator staring at me. So like I normally do, I looked up to ask if they needed any help with anything, and for the millisecond that I made eye contact, what I saw was truly horrible. It was a being composed entirely of black or wearing all black, except for his hands. It had these long claws that were unnaturally white, like it hadn't seen sunshine in years, and I couldn't see the face for some reason, but I know it had these big bulging eyes set recessed into its head. The moment I saw it, truly saw it, I froze in place and blinked because it was startling. I didn't feel terrified, but it did make me uncomfortable, and when I opened my eyes from that quick blink, it had disappeared. I'm not sure what I saw, but this isn't the first time I've seen something in that building. Bonus file, written by Anonymous. My son sent us a sign. I would really like to share this experience with you guys. I've never told anyone this before because when I talk about stuff like this, people look at me like I'm nuts, but I'm not. A little backstory. My son died when he was 3 years old, back in 2018. He had cancer and battled it all his life. Fast forward to 2020. I was living in a house with my mom and sister and her boyfriend. We were sitting in our garage one night and all of a sudden, we saw a light flickering on a shelf in the very back of the garage. My sister's boyfriend went to see what it was. The light was coming from one of my mom's old phones that had been sitting in that spot for 2 years. It was all busted up and had never been charged in those 2 years. My sister's boyfriend picked it up and it stopped blinking. We tried to turn it on, but it was dead. We didn't think anything of it at first and sat it down on one of my son's Mickey Mouse coloring books. As soon as that phone touched his coloring book, it started flashing again. He picked it up and it stopped flashing. Set it down again on the coloring book, and again it started flashing. At this point, I was calling out to my son to see if it was him. I was asking him to give me a sign that it was him, and then the phone turned on. There was a random jumble of letters and numbers on the screen, but right there amongst the jumbled letters and numbers, it said Mickey Mouse. At that point, I knew it was him. I cried hysterically. We all did. We went inside with the phone and showed it to my mom and told her what happened. She couldn't believe it. The phone stopped flashing and I held it for a few hours to see if it would do it again. We were all about to go to bed, so my sister stood up and turned off the living room light. I set the phone down on our fireplace in the living room by a little cross and Bible. We were all about to go to our rooms when the light on the phone came on again. The light on the phone was pointed directly at the cross and casted a big shadow on the cross. The shadow of the cross covered one of our entire living room walls. All of our mouths dropped wide open. We all knew he was showing us a sign that he was okay. We all prayed together and talked to him that night. After that, the phone never turned on again, never flashed a light again either. I tried to charge it the next day and it never turned on. This is one of many experiences we've had since he died. It just lets me know there's more out there than we will ever be able to understand. Case file number 654, written by Bongman31. My TV told me to shut up. So it was 2008 or 2009, I can't remember exactly. It was around the time that the USA was phasing out antenna TVs, and there was this huge push to get the digital converter boxes. I'm sure lots of you remember this. So like many people, my family only had cable in the living room. All other TVs, including the one in my bedroom, needed the converter boxes. The converter boxes finally come, and I'm tasked with hooking them up in my room, my parents' room, and my sister's room. I get them all hooked up, and all is well for the first day. The next day, I noticed that periodically, my TV would get a large black box that would appear perfectly centered in my TV, and would take up about 60 to 70% of the screen, and all anyone could see was the outer border. This would happen multiple times daily, and only ever to my TV with my converter box. My parents didn't want to go through the hassle of replacing it, so I just had to deal with it. Oh well, fine. Months go by, and my best friend would come over and hang out all the time. We would play games and watch TV daily, so he has also seen the strange box that appeared on my TV multiple times daily. Now, the news is on, and I remember it was some interview with Reverend Al Sharpton. I don't recall exactly what it was about, but my friend and I both disagreed and were just acting obnoxiously and talking general crap about Al Sharpton and whatever he was harping on about. It is immediately after that the black box takes over the screen, except this time, in white letters and all caps inside that box reads, "Shut up," with at least 8 exclamation marks. We are both stunned and just immediately stare in silence at the screen. It wasn't subtitles. It wasn't closed captioning. It wasn't a hallucination. Someone, somehow, inserted those letters on my screen at the exact moment on purpose. Who it was or what the purpose is, I have never known, and it's driving me crazy thinking about it all these years later. The message stayed on the screen for at least 2 full minutes, and then just disappeared. This was the catalyst for both of us to start our journey through all things strange and conspiratorial, and I've never heard of anything similar happening to anyone else. We tore apart the converter box later that night, looking for any kind of transmitter device or microphone, but couldn't find anything of the sort. Of course, we had no experience with these things and were just teenagers, so entirely possible something was there that we just missed. I put the box back together and plugged it back in, just waiting and hoping another message would appear or something would come from it, but it never did. Neither of us have ever forgotten about it though, and we both wish we could know how it happens and why. Case notes, file number 654. I'm not sure how much of a conspiracy this is exactly. I know there's a lot of appliances now that have recording devices, and it's possible that these were experimental. This was essentially a test run, just to see how well it could perform. And then you combine this with maybe a disgruntled employee that was tasked with listening in. It kind of makes me think about current modern day social media, where there's plenty of big tech sites that have a lot of censorship. And not all of it is automated. Sometimes individual people have to do the appeal work and actually look at what was said. Of course, we're just humans, so sometimes things are misinterpreted, or maybe just that person's bias comes through. Because really, that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like someone was at the other end listening in when they weren't supposed to, and they certainly weren't meant to make their presence known, but they did. Because whatever you were saying about Al Sharpton was really messing with their head and pissing them off. Although maybe it was some sort of spirit influencing the EM field of the TV to generate a message, but the fact there was a black box on the TV screen many times before this message appeared leads me more towards the tech side of things and human beings. Case file number 655, written by Elgish, my uneasy best friend. Guys, I'm freaking the hell out. I've been thinking about this for hours and I can't stop. This happened maybe 10 hours ago. I don't know if this story is exactly a glitch, but I felt weird during all of it. I made plans today to go shopping somewhere in another city with my boyfriend. I was in my hometown, waiting at the bus stop, so I could get to the city by bus. After about 25 to 30 minutes of waiting, this girl who looked exactly like my best friend comes here waiting at the same bus stop. I thought it was strange that she came by to my hometown for no reason. She lives 1 hour away and is supposed to be in a college class. She has no reason to be here besides seeing me. I thought it was her, so I went up to her to catch up, obviously. I shouted her name eagerly and went in for a hug, but this girl looked horrified. She was not her, apparently, even though she had the same hair color, skin complexion, height, clothing style, body type, and even the same freaking voice, and of course the same face. I got too scared, so I just told her I must have mistaken her for someone else and quickly scurried away so that I could wait somewhere else. I texted my friend asking if she has any relatives that look a lot like her, or perhaps an identical twin sister whom she was separated from at birth who might have been waiting at the bus stop in my small hometown. She only has a brother that kind of resembles her, but no identical twin that she knows of. I'm not sure what happened today. My boyfriend can't find an explanation either. The thing is, I felt extremely uneasy seeing her before talking to her for some reason. Case file number 656, written by Happy Housewives 82. Time has no master. It does what it wants. When I was 17 years old, my friend and I had a really fun Saturday. She had a convertible car and we would drive around playing music and talking. We are still friends and have always had really good talks about the paranormal and universal glitches, even as teens. I have actually always been intuitive and had paranormal interactions as she has. Anyway, she ended up coming to my house and I'm the oldest of 5 kids. My bedroom was actually a breezeway that people would walk through to get to the garage, a basement and laundry room too. So usually, if a friend slept over, we slept in the TV room which had 2 sliding glass doors in the dining room. If you walked through the dining room, you would get to the kitchen. There was a wall, so you couldn't see if anyone was sitting at the kitchen table until you walked in. It was the 90s, so we didn't have cell phones, so no alarm, and there was a clock that chimes on the hour in that TV room. The clock chimed and we both woke up on the 2 couches and talked for a few minutes about our Sunday plan. Some of our friends had mentioned wanting to go to the beach, so we figured we would go call them. The clock said 8 a.m. when it chimed. We got up and walked into the kitchen, but no one was awake. 4 small kids and 2 parents just still asleep at 8 a.m. wouldn't make sense. So we looked at the clock in there and it said 6:30 a.m. Okay, maybe the clock in the TV room was wrong. We both go and lie back down talking for a few and then we decide to go back to sleep and wake up and call our friends about the beach later. We wake up this time because my sister comes in the room excited to see my friend. We hear the 2 sliding glass doors open and she comes in waking us up loudly. So we trudge into the kitchen and my mother and father are sitting looking tired and they say, "Sorry they woke up so early today." And we kept her out as long as we could. She's been up since 5 a.m. I look quickly at the clock and it's 6:15 a.m. I'm so confused, but then sometimes I have lucid dreams and very vivid dreams, so I assume I dreamt the thing before. We chat for a minute and I ask my friend if she's ready to call our friends and she just says, no, I have to go, and she leaves in a hurry. When I called her later to check in because I thought maybe something happened, she said, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but..." And she proceeded to tell me exactly what I experienced. She had experienced too. And I laughed and explained I had the same thing happen and thought I'd just been lucid dreaming. We are now almost 40 and we still talk about that day and theorize on why and how it happened to both of us. We haven't told many people because we did tell our friends, but they thought we made it up and our family just said we probably smoked too much pot. We know that some sort of glitch happened, and it's led me to where I am today. Bonus file, written by After Employer 5610, When a Doll Laughs Without a Doll. So when I was 7 or 9, I don't remember what age I was exactly. I had this doll that was about as tall as a German Shepherd dog. This doll had a voice box where if you pressed it, the doll would laugh and giggle for about 30 seconds. This voice box was placed in a pocket in the back of the doll's dress. Eventually, I kinda got annoyed with the voice box due to it going off a lot. Before this incident, I had thought that some stuff behind it was pressing it, or that the pocket was sewn on too tightly, so it was pressing the box when there was pressure on the pocket. So, as I said, I got annoyed by the box. I emptied out a drawer and placed the box in the drawer. I had closed the drawer carefully so as to not move the box in the slightest. After this, I went to sleep. At maybe midnight, I had woken up to the sound of the box coming from the doll. The doll I had made sure to place on the opposite side of the room from the drawer the box was in. Forgetting for a minute that I had taken the box out of the doll, I tried to go back to sleep. About 5 minutes later, I remembered where I put the box and got up to open the drawer. It was still there, exactly where I had left it. A few weeks later, I got rid of the doll. However, for a few years after that, I could still hear the laughter of the doll's voice box, and it was very loud. I only remembered this incident when I had found one of my porcelain dolls on the kitchen counter. My mom had moved it there for some reason. Case file number 657, written by Master Advantage 5833, the most ominous neighborhood in the world. To begin, I was not high when these events happened. I was in a car with a few of my friends driving around to find a spot to park and smoke. These events took place a couple of months ago. I'm a college student in a very small North Carolina town. It's a population of about 3,000 people, and the town is less than 3 square miles, with most of it being one long road leading to and from the big cities. The demographic here is pretty much exclusively old people. One thing to support this is the amount of funeral homes on every corner. My friends and I have always talked about how it's creepy being that it's such a small town. But it makes sense because the people are all much older. One day, the 5 of us pack into our friend's car and start to drive around. We're looking for somewhere that's kinda discreet since it's still daylight out, but not just blatantly on someone's property. We pull into a neighborhood that looks pretty typical. Simple one-story houses that all look the same, until they didn't. We turned into a road that split off into a cul-de-sac. The moment we turned onto this road, I got a sinking pit in my stomach, as if we were somewhere we're not supposed to be, like we had broken something in the universe, or accidentally shifted dimensions. I remember looking at my roommate next to me in the back seat and instinctively murmuring, "We shouldn't be here." Each of the houses with the cul-de-sac were extremely unique and different. One was a pretty sunshine yellow, narrow 2-story house. One was a wider and more full blue and purple house. One looked like a normal suburban 1-story beige house, but instead of beige, it was a deep maroon color. And the last one, all the way on the right, was a dark gray house with black trim. Each of the houses were very close together and had different yard decorations, from big extravagant Easter bunnies and Easter eggs, to random gnomes, to Christmas trees, to wagons all over. They were scattered about like landmines. The dark house had shovels scattered about, but no holes in the ground that implied digging. The cul-de-sac had a long, narrow, grassy median/island that you drive around to enter and leave. All of us in the car had an overwhelming urge to leave immediately, so we made our way around the little island. As we got around it, we looked at the dark house again. A man stood on the side of the house, facing us but standing completely still. He was a black man wearing yellow with blue overalls and a dark shadow in front of his face. I don't know if it was hair or some sort of covering, but his face was not visible. We sped off and out of the neighborhood, worried that maybe he'd think we were trespassing and shoot us, something you always have to be prepared for in rural North Carolina. This was the rational worry at the time, but in the moment, we felt an energy so powerful it could have pinned us to the ground if it tried. It felt all-knowing and maybe even evil. We left without issues, but all of us felt the same pit in our stomachs like we saw something we weren't supposed to. The weirdness doesn't stop there though. When recalling the events, our stories all match up until recalling the man in the yard. We all saw someone, but the 5 of us each have a very different description of the person. One of them saw a little girl in a dress, somebody else saw a woman in white, someone else a man with a long beard and a guy wearing what looked like a dark suit. Each recollection of the memory, the person stood frozen in the exact same spot on the side of the house. To this day, we have no idea what we encountered or what exactly happened. It freaked all of us out and we swore to never go back. I'm typing this while it's still extremely fresh. I spent all day, Tuesday, looking for the neighborhood via maps and eventually found it. The neighborhood looked a lot different when seeing the satellite and street views, but the images were from 2013, so I attributed it to that. I decided to go back with my roommate and our friend who was driving that day. Upon pulling into the neighborhood, we all realized it looked very different. The same island and median was there, but it looked like the satellite images I had seen before. We all recalled the houses we had previously seen, particularly referencing the yellow house we had seen that was no longer there. We were all so sure of the yellow house that we were able to recall a conversation about that house. There was one house that was there that we all had a memory of being there the first time. There was another house that my roommate and other friend remembered and said it was where they both saw the person they saw. It was a white house, not the dark house from before. I didn't remember the white house at all, but sure, I could have missed it the first time. However, I know for a fact that I had seen the man by the dark house the first time. There was one house that stood out to us that we didn't remember. It was an eerie look at a brick house that looked like no one had lived there for years. I went back to the neighborhood fully expecting it to look the same way, only for it to be almost completely different. No decorations, houses had been replaced, but the energy was still extremely off. I was prepared for the shift in energy, so I don't think it affected me as much as the others. They both had full body goosebumps and felt sick. I've attached some images here. The first picture is the brick house that wasn't there the first time. The second picture is the white house they both apparently saw the person at. And the third picture is the house we all remember. Case notes, file number 657. My first impression as I'm reading this is that your entire group had memories implanted. Although they weren't a perfect match, and I imagine if someone is able to implant memories, it wouldn't be an exact science. In many science fiction shows, there's technology that can be employed to recreate memories in someone's head exactly, down to minute details. But I don't think, if it's ever possible in real life, that it would be ever so precise. The brain is sort of a quantum computer. There are quantum states that are more like making suggestions rather than programming in binary exact sequences. I don't know if that is ever possible, even for aliens with advanced technology. Now, do I think this is aliens? Well, I'm not sure about that, since you didn't report any time loss. It actually strikes me more as some sort of government experimental area, which makes sense in a rural setting, away from most people. Maybe they were testing some sort of frequency device that was messing and altering with people's perception. That's why everyone saw something different than the other. It would also explain why the houses are back to normal now. The government probably sold that off as a defunct experiment, if that is what it was. Bonus file, written by Substantial Yam, 2086. In Vega, people die in threes. I come from a village called Vega, on a small island in the Caribbean called Trinidad. We had a saying in my village, when a person dies in Vega, they drag down 2 others with them, or simply, people die in threes in Vega. When I was a young boy, an old man from my street named Sundar died. He was drunk and fell out of the passenger door of a truck while it was driving. It rolled over him. Directly across the street from Sundar was a mentally unstable man whose wife and children had left him. He committed suicide by drinking herbicide days after Sundar died. Apparently, he didn't dilute it either. The spot on the sidewalk where he vomited was grass-free for almost a year after he died, while grass grew all around it. I would stand on that clean spot for the bus. A guy from next door also died the following week. 3 men from 3 close-by houses within a few days of each other. Fast forward to last year. My uncle Suk died from a stroke. During the wake, I heard one of my cousins say, "Let's wait and see who Suk is dragging down with him." Then, the following week, another of my relatives died from the virus. Imagine a main street with 3 side streets on the right side. Uncle Suk died in his home, the 3rd house on the 1st street. My other relative died in his home, the 3rd house on the 3rd street. Because it was a virus death, we couldn't gather at the house of mourning for fear of folks catching the virus. So we all gathered at my cousin's house instead, which incidentally was the third house on the second street. During the wake, I realized we were directly in the middle and all 3 houses were in a straight line, even though they were on 3 different streets. I joked that since our uncle died in the house a street down, and our other uncle died in the house a street prior, and the house we were at now was lined up perfectly in the middle, that the people living in that house should be careful to not complete the 3. It was a joke. We all laughed. My cousin from that house died in a car accident the next week. People die in 3s in Vega.